Morning, everyone. I'm just going to do a quick introduction of our panelists. Thank you so much for coming today. Hopefully, our programming today is useful for you. And the way that these programs typically run is we're going to have our panelists give some quick presentations at the start. And then after those presentations are all done, then there will be time for people to ask questions. We encourage you to unmute yourself and ask questions, but you're also welcome to just put those questions into the chat during the presentation so you don't forget them and we can address them as the session goes on. So my name's Emma Volk. I'm the production horticulture advisor in Ventura and Santa Barbara counties, but I'm not a panelist today. I'm going to introduce our panelists who are Chris Shogren. He is an environmental horticulture advisor in LA County and Orange County. We have Haramrit Gill, who is an environmental horticulture advisor in Tulare, Kings, Fresno, and Madera counties. And then we have Eric Middleton, who is an IPM advisor or integrated pest management advisor in San Diego County. So I'm going to let them take over the rest of the show today.
Um, so I know a lot of you guys are new here, so this is how we're doing things. So I'll be quick. I'm going to talk about emerging pests in the nursery industry. I'm just going to mention a couple pests that aren't here in California yet, but it is something that I feel like these are going to be some of the next ones that are introduced because they're spreading in other parts of the USA. I've had calls about a couple of these already. People thought, hey, I have these. So that's what I'm going to be presenting on real quick to you guys. Um, we're going to start off with box tree moth. I'm sure some of you have heard about box tree moth already. It is a pest of boxwood. There's actually some people here in California with USDA that are working on this pest already, helping out on the East Coast with this pest. So start with this guy. So his first box tree moth first came into kind of Northern California 2018 and has since, spread fairly rapidly. It's found in Canada first, right across the border from New York. And from New York, it slowly started spreading around in New York there. A couple years later, it was found in Michigan, then Ohio, then Massachusetts. And now it's found Delaware, Kentucky, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia as well. So, kind of within 10 years of first being found in Canada, it's already spread to about 10 states here in the US and is rapidly spreading. And there on that right hand side picture, you can see the damage that this does. It's a very voracious feeder. You see a lot of webbing from the caterpillars, doing a lot of damage to boxwoods. Larva, fairly small, about an inch and a half long. You can see that adult moth there, also about an inch and a half wingspan, but larvae cause extensive feeding damage, and boxwood is kind of one of those staple landscape plants that we have that nurseries grow all the time. So, if it does get here, it is going to cause a lot of damage to our nursery industry, as well as the landscape industry. So there is some work going on management of this. One possibility is using pheromone traps. So there's that's going on in development. But there are also good insecticide options for this. So BT works great, spinosad works great on this. So you don't have to use kind of those harsh chemicals. But we'll deal with management. Hopefully it doesn't get here for a while. But we'll deal kind of on the management side once it does get here. But just want to put it on your radar. Look out on your boxwoods. Inspect them if you're getting boxwoods in from other parts of the US. You want to make sure that you're looking at them to make sure that they don't have any box tree moth on them. And the next one that I want to talk about real quickly here is crepe myrtle bark scale. I'll be honest, I stole this presentation. So that's why, it's credited to somebody else here from Texas. I got a copy of their presentation and just put their slides directly on here. But I've already had multiple people call me about crepe myrtle bark scale. They're like, "Hey, I think I have crepe myrtle bark scale. Can you come take a look?" Um, and so far, I haven't confirmed crepe myrtle bark scale here in California yet, but it is one. Crepe myrtles everywhere, and so this once this one is introduced here, will cause a lot of problems. Crepe myrtle, staple of the landscape. It's the number one urban tree in California. So this pest does get here, obviously, going to cause a lot of damage. So here's a picture of what, a good infestation of crepe myrtle bark scale looks like. Pretty hard to miss in heavy infestations. I mean, the tree is just loaded with the scale. And when it was first found, it was found in Texas. They thought it was azalea scale. Similar, same genus, just different species. So that's what they initially identified it as. They just thought it had jumped hosts, but it is actually a different species. So first found in Texas in 2004, and it spread all over southeast, and it's just continuing to spread its range. Um, does have a number of other hosts, mostly in the myrtle family, but American beautyberry is another good host for it, and that's where it's actually been found a lot on in Texas and some of these other states. But it is also found on some of the other myrtles like pomegranate, um, and some of these other plants in the myrtle family, loosestrife, and whatnot. So just be aware it is a major pest. Here, you can just see more pictures of crepe myrtle bark scale. Um, it builds up populations very quickly, produces a lot of city mold. Those heavy infestations start to cause branch dieback on those crepe myrtles. So just want to put this on your radar. Keep a lookout for these two pests. And save your questions. We'll get to them after this, but I will at this point hand it off to Eric to talk about some recent introductions that have actually made it here into California.
So, good morning, everybody. My name is Haramrit Gill, and I'm Environmental Horticulture Advisor in Tulare, Fresno, Kings, and Madera counties. And today I'm going to be talking about mite management in nursery production. Mainly, I'm going to be talking about different types of mites and the different species that are found in nurseries. What do they look like? How to manage them? So, let's get started. So, what are mites? So, mites are not really insects. These are microscopic arthropods, and these are related to spiders and ticks. So, they have two body regions, and they can have two the type of mites. So there are many different species of mites, and they can be pests for humans, animals, stored fruits, and plants as well. So today we're gonna be obviously talking about plant pests. So these mites, these are called phytophagous mites, and these can feed on leaves, stems, and flowers, and these can reduce plant quality and yield. So, what are the different common nursery mites? So, worldwide, there are estimated about like 6,000 to 7,000 species of plant feeding mites. So, out of these species, there are four major groups, and there are subspecies found in these four major groups. So, these four major groups include spider mites, which belong to Tetranychidae family, and they have about 1,200 species. And the second group is flat mites, which belongs to Tenuipalpidae family, and they have about 1,000 species. And the third group is broad mites, which belong to Tarsonimidae family, and these have about 500 to 600 species of mites. And the fourth group is gall or bud mites and rust mites as well, and these belong to Aerophidae family, and these contain about 4,000 species of mites. So I'm going to discuss all four groups one by one. We'll start with the spider mites. So these are the most commonly found mite species, and these are less than 1 mm in size, and they vary in color. The picture here on the right, the lower picture, this is two-spotted spider mite, and these have plump, rounded, oval-shaped bodies. And as the name suggests, most species, they produce webbing, and you can see in the picture above, there is a web, and these mites are really small. It's hard to see them with naked eye, but you can see like tiny dots moving around. Um, so these cause damage by puncturing the plant cells, and they feed on the plant. Mostly they live underside of the older leaves, and they prefer hot and dry conditions. So most of the ornamental plants that act as hosts for these mites include hibiscus, palms, viburnum, orchids, marigold, dracaena, roses, juniper, and podocarpus. So next are flat mites. These are often called false spider mites, mostly because they look like spider mites, but they don't like spin webs, so they are called false spider mites. These are also microscopic. They have flattened pancake-like bodies. So so mostly the flat mites, they live on the underside of the leaves along the main vein. And the symptoms include scratch-like symptoms, which are mostly silver or brown markings, particularly along the midrib of the leaves or the stems. You can see in the picture at the top, this is a Hoya plant with brown or silver markings from the flat mite infestation. So some of the species of flat mites, they can actually transmit viruses, including orchid feck virus and hibiscus infecting sillivirus. Flat mites are notorious for Hoyas and Calatheas specifically, but they can be found in other plants like hibiscus, ferns, palm, jasmine, privet, orchids, and many more. So the next species are broad mites. So these are also small mites, also known as thread-footed mites because of their long, thin appendages on the adult's rear legs. You can see on the picture on the right, top right, they have thread-like legs. They prefer high relative humidity, unlike spider mites, which prefer dry and hot climate. So broad mites like to feed on new leaves, buds, and growing tips. So the symptoms include, once you get broad mite infestation, you'll see curling or distorted leaves. You can see on the lower right picture here, which is showing a little bit of curling and damaged, deformed leaves. So broad mites are mostly found in African violet, azalea, begonias, chrysanthemums, dahlias, ivies, zinnia, jasmine. So next are gall mites. These are also very extremely small, microscopic, cannot be seen with the naked eye. They like to live on the underside of the leaves or in between new buds. They are usually host specific, and these are also capable of transmitting viruses. So gall mites, they inject chemical inside the leaf and produce gall-like symptoms, as you can see in the top right picture. The most common hosts for these mites are hibiscus, privet, camellia, roses, lantana, and podocarpus, and they produce witch's broom-like symptoms. Next, we'll talk about the life cycle of spider mite. So a female spider mite, it can lay up to 20 eggs per day, and it can live for about 2 to 4 weeks. And so in its lifetime, it can lay around like 100 eggs. So the eggs can hatch in as little as 3 days, and eggs then become larvae, which has like 6 legs, and then it transforms to nymphs. Nymph has 2 stages, protonymphs and deutonymphs, and nymphs has 8 legs, and then they transform to adults, again carry 8 legs. So just like spider mites, flat mite also has 4 stages from egg, larvae, nymph to adult, while broad mites, they have 3 stages. So from egg, it turns to larva and then straight to adult. For gall mites, again, 3 stages. The egg hatches and turn into nymph and then to adult. So mites can crawl within the individual plants, but they can only be passively dispersed for long distances only by air or by other insects, such as whiteflies. So how can we control mites? So there are different ways. We'll talk about biological control first. So there are mite predators which we can use for controlling mites. Some of the examples are big-eyed bugs, brown lacewings, green lacewing, and then larvae of predaceous midges, rove beetle, minute pirate bugs, and then six-spotted thrips. The other biological control would be predatory mites, which are actually most important biological control. The species that can be used for predatory mites are Phytocilius pressimilis. So the picture on the right, bottom right, the orange bug here is Phytocilius pressimilis. So this mite, it feeds on egg, larvae, and adult, mostly on all stages. And then on the top, the other predatory mite could be Neocelis californicus. This bug also likes to feed on all stages. So the larvae of these predatory mites, they don't like to feed on any of the stages of spider mites or other bugs, but the adults, they pretty much feed on all the stages. So next is cultural control. For cultural control, we need to carefully inspect the new plants and the propagation stock that we are using to propagate our plants. We make sure that they are pest-free. We need to rogue or effectively treat infested crops. Because spider mites, they like to hide in different places. So we need to keep our production area clean and free of weeds that are, capable of harboring any kind of infestation. So we need to make sure that we are disposing of any crop debris and weeds, and that too in covered containers. And to get rid of mites, we can use botanical neem oil, other narrow range oils, and then insecticidal soaps. So neem oil can work on all stages of mites, but not great for eggs. So there are other oils like rosemary and clove oil, which can kill eggs, but eggs are the hardest stage to kill. So we have to reapply these oils over and over again to make sure that we are covering pretty much all stages, or we are catching at least the nymph or the larvae stage, so they don't become adult and are sexually mature and capable of laying more eggs. So next is monitoring and treatment decisions. So we need to monitor our crop plants regularly for mites. We need to check for the feeding damage, symptoms like cast skin or foliage bleaching, some webbing, and other changes in foliage appearance. These are like main mite feeding behavior that we need to look for. So weekly inspection should be done. We should look for mites on the underside of the leaf. It's great if you have handheld lens, 10x would be great. So sticky traps, these are not great for mites because mites are wingless, so they don't really, they're not great at catching mites. So most of the miticides, they can be used to, get rid of mites. Some of the examples are Contos, Savit, and Akari. But again, these chemicals needs to be applied over and over again to cover all the stages, and we make sure that while we are applying these chemicals, we are covering the whole plant, all the leaves, underside of the leaves pretty well. And with that, I will pass it on to Nick, and I'll take the questions later.
All right, so I'm going to be talking about 3 very specific pests, cottonseed bug, and then 2 new thrip species. I've talked a little bit about these. These are all 3 projects that I've got going on right now, but there are some updates with all of them, and these are definitely things that you all should be on the lookout for. So we're going to start off with cottonseed bug, which is abbreviated as CSB throughout the rest of this presentation, Oxycorinus hyalopenis. Pictured here on the penny, this is what the adults look like. They're dark. They're kind of a generally small seed bug, about 3 to 4 millimeters long. They sort of have a pointed face and then clear, sort of look like whitish wings held over their back as well. Adults, like I said, have all those features. They can fly. They usually tend to prefer to walk around or sort of move just like short distances, but they can fly. As to exactly how far they can fly, unfortunately, we're still a little bit unsure. The nymphs look kind of similar in general shape, although they are rounder and they're this kind of more reddish color. They tend to also be a bit more hidden. They're not going to be out and about as much. They're going to be more inside different parts of the plants, and they're going to be a little bit harder to find. In general, the life cycle, they'll lay eggs and seed pods, up to about 110 of them. These go through 5 instars, which takes around 14 to 20 days. And the entire life cycle can actually be quite fast if there's warm weather, and you can have multiple generations per year. So about 20 days for life cycle. These guys can reproduce pretty quickly. You can get quite a few of them, especially in sort of the hot, drier areas, say down in Southern California or potentially up in Central Valley areas if it should happen to get there. As far as its distribution and its hosts, this map over here is an out-of-date now map of where it is found in the world, but it's found in a whole bunch of different countries. It is also now here in the US, which is not currently highlighted in red. It's originally native to Africa. It spread to Europe, Asia, and South America. It was also then found in LA in 2019, and it is now considered established in Southern California. So it is present in LA, Orange County, San Diego, Santa Barbara, Ventura, Riverside, and potentially more counties as well. But basically all of Southern California, it's here, and it is present in landscape plants all over. So if you just go out and find some of their hosts, you are very, very likely to run into cottonseed bug. It is well established and it is abundant. As hosts, they are feeding primarily on plants in the family Malvaceae, and they feed on the reproductive parts of the plant. So in this picture here, this is a mallow out in the landscape. You can see the seed pod that's sort of opened up, and there's a bunch of cottonseed bugs. Oftentimes, a shocking amount of them can live inside of these small little seed pods. So again, as the name implies, they feed on cotton. That's one of the primary crops that they'll actually go after. But they also feed on things like hibiscus and mallows, but they can feed on a whole bunch of other things. If you have a plant that has these sort of enclosed seed pods, kind of similar to the mallow pictured here, it definitely can harbor cottonseed bug. And they found them on things like mints. We've also just found them hanging out on the leaves of sycamore trees. So yes, they feed on mallows or malvaceous plants. They need that to complete their life cycle, but they definitely can go on other plants. So you should be aware of that and keep an eye out for them. They're a very serious pest of cotton. For the rest of the things where you don't really need the seeds to be set, they're not that serious of a problem. So in and of themselves, they're not really a problem for mostly the nursery and ornamental industry. However, they have been found relatively recently on California nursery stock, and this is a very serious export concern because they are not currently found. Cottonseed bug is not currently found in the cotton growing regions of the United States or in the cotton growing regions of California more specifically. And people really don't want to get it there because it can cause very significant yield loss in cotton. The nymphs can get crushed in the machinery and stain the cotton lint, which you then have to deal with. So it is actually a quite serious pest. And because of that, eradication is required if it is found in California nurseries. And that's a whole sort of issue in and of itself. So not directly damaging to most nursery plants, but it is a serious export concern and therefore has to be controlled. We did some studies on this, basically looking at different insecticide trials to see what works best at controlling cottonseed bug, because very little was known about this pest outside of cotton. We tested drenches of acephate, flupyradiferone, and dinotefuran, which are kind of a range of different things that are very harsh, commonly used by growers, or sort of a more soft option in the case of flupyradiferone. Basically, what we're looking at here in this graph, we have the number of living cottonseed bug adults 15 days after treatment on the y-axis. That's the number of cottonseed bugs. On the x-axis, we have our different treatments. So acephate, control, dinotefuran, and flupyradiferone. Basically, 2 weeks after treatment, acephate had killed every single cottonseed bug that was present. Dinotefuran had killed most of the ones that were present. And flupyradiferone, strangely, seemed to actually, allow them to persist even better than, say, in the control. So basically what we found from these drenches is that acephate was highly effective, dinotefuran did a little bit, flupyradiferone did nothing. We took these same plants and we applied cottonseed bug to them again 32 days after we had treated them. So basically, we're trying to see a month later, are these drenches still effective? On the y-axis, we have the number of surviving cottonseed bug. On the x-axis, we have those treatments again. We didn't test flupyratifurone because it didn't work in the first place, so we didn't continue it for the rest of the trial. But we found that even a month later, acephate was still 100% effective at killing all cottonseed bugs that came in contact with the plant. So they fed on it and they died immediately. Dinotefuran did an okay job, but again, it's reducing the numbers, but it's not fully eradicating them. And when it comes to cottonseed bug, you do have to have it fully eradicated if it is found in nursery stock. So the sort of take home for all this is that acephate killed all the cottonseed bug. Dinotefuran killed most of them, but it would not be sufficient in this situation. Flupyratifurone did nothing as a drench, although it probably will be effective as a foliar spray, and we have not yet tested that. So again, acephate's the best option for eradication. We do have more trials on this coming soon to try to figure out what different options are actually available. And so we're not just using acephate over and over and over again. But in the meantime, if you run a nursery, and especially if you're in Southern California, where you might get some of these coming in, keep an eye out for cottonseed bug. It's going to be a hassle, but do please report it if it is found in nurseries, because we really do not want this pest spreading to cotton growing regions and becoming a very serious problem for growers there. We don't want to spread this problem somewhere else and make it a bigger issue. So that was a very brief rundown of cottonseed bug. Got any questions? Let me know about that later on. We're now going to switch onto Thrips parvospinus. This is another pest that I've been keeping track of for a bit longer. It's pictured in the background here. You are familiar, I'm sure, with what thrips look like. This particular species is about half yellow, half dark as female. So it's an adult female picture in the background. Here's another picture of adult females and adult males as well. Males, you're never going to be able to tell apart from anything else, but the females are decently distinctive if you have magnification. They tend to be very active. They tend to be quite fast. And overall, they look kind of like a dark thrips. They have that sort of dark appearance to them, whereas things like Western flower thrips generally have a more sort of yellow appearance to them. So that's a decent way to sort of parse out, okay, is this just Western flower thrips, or maybe is it something I might have to take a closer look at? They have hosts of dipladenias, mandevillas, gardenias, peppers, and anthuriums. Those are the most common ones that they are found on, but they feed on a whole bunch of stuff. They are highly prolificous and can go on a big range of things. Hoyas, orchids, they can feed on citrus. There's a whole bunch of different stuff. So if you're growing ornamentals, they can be there, but if you're growing dipladenias, mandevillas, gardenias, or peppers, and potentially also anthuriums, then you're much more likely to potentially run into Thrips parvospinus. They're damaged from feeding. Don't have enough time to sort of go into all of these, but again, if you have questions, of course, let me know. They cause more distortions generally than other thrips. Their feeding damage is more similar to what you might expect from broad mite damage, where it's not just scarring, it also leads to notches in leaves, distortions of the tips and stuff like that, in addition to also causing that sort of scarring and stunting that is very characteristic of thrips damage. This pest is not known to be present in California, but it is present in places like Florida and Hawaii, as well as a number of different other parts of the world, where it is a pretty serious pest of peppers and other greenhouse and nursery plants. However, I was worried that it might be coming in to San Diego and Southern California in particular, because we have a big nursery trade here. The environment's pretty good for them, and previous work had indicated that Thrips parvospinus can show up undetected for a while. So we went out and we started checking a whole bunch of retail stores just to see, okay, is Thrips parvospinus even here? And we immediately, when we did this, found Thrips parvospinus all throughout stores in San Diego County. This was back at the end of 2024 throughout 2025. So basically, it was in every single store we sampled, and the only ones it wasn't present in were stores that weren't selling those common host plants. So it was everywhere. We traced the plants back to one grower, working with the county. The county went in, the plants that the grower had that were infested, they elected to destroy them, and the thrips disappeared for a while. We surveyed the stores again. They weren't really present. But unfortunately, they are present again in stores this year. We went out again at the end of last year, coming into this year, did another round of surveys, and we found Thrips parvospinus again, present in all of these stores, present also in parts of Orange County as well. So this is still ongoing, but it seems that, yes, Thrips parvospinus is likely at this point now present in the landscape, or even if it isn't, it's probably going to be a continual issue for nurseries, where it's going to continue to show up, continue to pop up, and people are going to continue to have to deal with it. So unfortunately, I think it is highly likely that this is going to be here to stay, and it's not one of those pests that we can end up successfully eradicating. Maybe we can. Hope springs eternal, but I don't think that is likely to be the case. With all that in mind, there's been some previous research done into Thrips parvispinus. There are options for killing them. It's not exactly the same as for other things like Western flower thrips. Some things that work well for Western flower thrips don't work particularly well for Thrips parvispinus. Generally speaking, spinosad, things like conserve, works very well. There's another option that we don't have present here in California, which is expire, which is a Floxiflora plus spinetorum. That also works really well, but again, that is not labeled for use in California. You cannot use that. So in terms of the different things that work quite well, things like chlorphenapyr and spinosad are currently the two best options, and they can be rotated with other things that can kill larvae, reduce larval feeding, like Contos or tolfenpyrad, things like that. So there are options available. They don't work as well as for Western flower thrips, and research is still ongoing, but there are tools that can be used, like the ones pictured in this table back here. All right, so ultimately, what should you do for Thrips parvispinus? Learn to recognize the damage. Again, I didn't have much time to go into this, but distortions, severe scarring, stuff like that, that's often indicative of Thrips parvispinus damage. And basically, if some of these common hosts, Diplodenias, gardenias, mandevilles, or peppers look really bad, there's a decent chance it could be Thrips parvispinus. So if your plants are starting to look bad and you got those common hosts, take a deeper dive into it, see what it might be doing. Check incoming plants, especially those coming from Florida, because that's almost certainly where this came in the first place. Report it if you do find it. Again, it is probably going to be here to stay, but we really want to try to get a handle on this as much as possible and prevent it from becoming a serious pest if we can. Have an eradication plan using things like spinosad or chlorphenapyr, again, as the active ingredients should work pretty well. An aggressive action likely can eradicate it, but only if you are also checking your incoming plants and making sure it's not becoming a continual issue of being reestablished over and over again. We are going to be looking for it in the landscape. If any of you know any places where there are big gardenia hedges around, please let me know, because I think that's likely to be a place where we find it in the landscape. We tried looking for those. We didn't find them. If it is present in the landscape and we find it in the landscape, we can likely downgrade this from an A-rated pest, which requires quarantine action and putting your plants on hold, to a B-rated pest. So again, if any of you know of any big aggregations of host plants in the landscape, let me know. I want to go check it out because I think Thrips parvispinus is probably present in the landscape. We just haven't been able to find it yet. Realistically, as we said, it is probably here to stay, unfortunately, but we should try to still work preventatively to make sure it doesn't become a serious issue. All right, last pest is Thrips dimediatus, another thrips species, also known as allothrips. It's native to South Africa, so that's where it's usually native. It's also then spread to parts of Europe like Portugal, Spain, and Italy. It's found feeding on aloe arborescens and aloe vera, as well as hybrids of these two species. That's its only hosts that are known so far, but again, we'll have to see. They could certainly feed on other aloes as well. As we said, Portugal, other parts of Europe. Basically, nothing is known about the biology of it, though, because it is not widespread throughout a whole bunch of places. But lucky us, it is actually here now. So here's what it looks like, a picture of the adult. It has these sort of three whitish bands on the wings, one at the very tip, one in the middle, and one where they connect to the thorax. This is Thrips dimediatus. It looks very, very similar to banded greenhouse thrips. Banded greenhouse thrips is a very common species that's already here, well established, that many of you have probably run into. Thrips dimediatus basically has another stripe in the wings. So keep an eye out for that. And again, just because you see stripy thrips does not mean it's thrips or allothrips in particular. In California, here's up in the background, there's a picture of a whole bunch of them feeding on an aloe leaf. Basically, we confirmed that they're present in California here in early 2026, so just early this year. Randy Baldwin of San Marcos Growers sent out some information thinking he thought this was present here. He ended up being right. We then went out, found this at the San Diego Zoo, sent it to CDFA, got it confirmed. And basically, we now know that allothrips are present in San Diego, Ventura, and Santa Barbara counties. And it is very, very likely that they're present throughout much of Southern California as well. We're trying to determine where else it all is. So if you see it, let us know. We'll talk about what the damage looks like in just a second. And we're looking into management options shortly because there is no information on this currently. No one has really studied this at all. And it definitely is present here in Southern California, so we'd like to take a look at that. So what is it that you should be looking out for, and then hopefully reporting back to us so we get a better idea of where it's present, if it's present in nurseries, if it's just present in the landscape, all those sorts of things. This is what the damage looks like. So in the background, you can see this kind of darkening, splotching, and bronzing of all of these aloe leaves. This is relatively minor damage right now. But their feeding causes these black and silver sections where you get pretty intense scarring present on the leaves. It looks kind of similar to some abiotic damage you might see, or just sort of like sun damage, but it gets much more intense as well. So large scarred areas, blackened leaves, and the plant starts to die back as well. The damage is usually seen on older landscape plants. I say that, but we haven't had much experience with this, so they also certainly could be present in nurseries. It rarely seems to kill the plants until it really gets going, at which point it definitely can actually start to kill them. So I'm going to update this one a little bit because it does actually now seem to be killing plants to a greater degree. As we said, it can look very similar to abiotic damage. Aloes can get sunburned or darkened spots or stuff like that. So just because you see darkening on your plant does not mean it's thrips. If it becomes widespread and very severe, then it is much more likely. Here's some other pictures. These are taken from the zoo where you can see sort of the spotting on these lower leaves of the aloe. Here's another one where there's those bronze sections, areas of scarring. And then over here, a bit more of a close-up where, again, large blackened areas, lots of notable scarring. Here's some additional pictures. This is one from downtown San Diego where there was just this single aloe plant in a pot all on its own. This has aloe thrips damage where you can see lots of darkening and bronzing of the leaves. This is another one that has much more intense blackening that I found outside of a gas station. Yeah, that's definitely aloe thrips. I also found the thrips themselves on the plant. And this is what it looks like as the whole thing starts to die back, where there's been so much damage and eventually the entire plant begins withering away, or entire sections of it begin withering away. This is what the immatures look like. So they're kind of under magnification. They're pretty hard to see without magnification, but they look kind of shiny, almost wet, and they often usually have these globs of liquid feces hanging off the tip of their abdomen. So looking for something like that where there's kind of reddish and pale coloration, and they've got these big blobs of poop hanging off the back, that is Thrips dimediatus or aloe thrips. And again, this is what the adult looks like with these 3 striped bands present on its back. So keep an eye out for these, keep an eye out for the damage, and especially if you see both the damage and the thrips together, we'd really like to know about it. So with all that in mind, my email is here. Those are the 3 pests that we're talking about: cottonseed bug, thrips parvospinus, and aloe thrips. If you do find aloe thrips, take a picture, note the location, and send it to me at aloe.thrips@gmail.com. That's kind of a way for me to bin everything together and keep everything in one place. I also just created an Instagram reel, if you happen to be on Instagram, that has information on this. You can see videos of them moving around. There's more pictures and stuff of it. So if any of you want to take a look at that, scan the QR code right there. And one last thing, I'm talking about all 3 of these pests in more detail coming up soon at the CAPCA meeting, the Nursery Greenhouse Seminar at June 3rd in Escondido as well. So if any of you are in Southern California and you want to learn more about this, or we don't answer all of your questions, I'll be spending a lot more time talking about all of these then as well. So with that, we can open up the floor to questions for any of us on any of the different things that we talked about today.
So there have been sorry, Ariana McRae, go ahead.
I am the director of the Irrigated Lands Group, and for those of you, or Los Angeles Irrigated Lands Group, and for those of you who are looking for education or continuing education credits, I will put a link in the chat at the end of the webinar. And then if you have any other questions, or if Zoom is not your friend, feel free to give me a call or send me an email and we will get you your hours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There have been a few questions that have come through the chat. I think a lot of them have been answered, but there is one or a few that we haven't yet. So Barb asks, well, first notes that the symptoms of Thrips dimediatus seems to be similar to a lot of aloe that they see in Encinitas, and then asked if there are any biological or chemical control options.
So we don't know. Stuff that works well against most thrips, like spinosad, is almost certainly going to be effective against aloe thrips as well, but we don't know yet. So those are some trials that Emma and I are hopefully going to be working on shortly to see what actually works for them. But that is something we are wanting to study and will be shortly, but we don't have any information on that as of right now. If you do have a bunch of aloes and Encinitas and you have actual locations, take a picture and send it to me. I've seen some up there and trying to sort of map out where it is in the county, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, and then the next question was asking if it's aloe only. Is it found on agave as well?
So it seems to be aloe only currently. I don't think it's going to be an issue on agave. We'll see if it ends up being, but because it's aloe and specifically aloe arborescens, aloe vera, or hybrids of those two that seem to be hit, then it seems unlikely it's also going to make the jump over to agave. So again, if you're looking for it, aloe arborescens, aloe vera, or a hybrid of either of those two species. But keep an eye on everything because, you know, who knows, we might find something else too.
Yeah, and then a similar question, but I think you kind of already answered it, is can aeonium be susceptible to Thrips as well?
Yeah, don't know at this point.
Yeah, and then wow, there are a lot of questions. Just a quick note, yes, someone asked if these slides will be shared. We are going to post all recordings of these sessions moving forward to our new YouTube account. So Sam Romano shared the link to that YouTube account in the chat. So you can click on that, and we actually have the recording from last month's Ask the Advisor session already posted. So feel free to check those out. And then I can answer Barb's question specifically about Master Gardener stuff in private chat. And then Jennifer Bantola asks, is spinosad harmful to bees?
Yes, if it gets in contact with them, it will hurt them. So, you know, if you are doing this, apply it more late at night, where bees aren't going to be present and flying at the time. Spinosad, depending on which one you use, doesn't have a super long residual. And again, you should be spraying it on aloes that, again, hopefully aren't flowering. But be aware because it definitely can harm bees. That being said, it has to actually get in contact with them in order to harm them.
And then Lee asks, are there planned trials using insecticides with Captiva?
Currently, I'm not sure. What is the AI in Captiva? Is it basically oil-based? Oh, interesting. Maybe that'd be interesting to take a look at because yeah, other options that are not as harsh and that also be more fit in line with SPM and stuff like that would be very useful for something like this. So I'll definitely keep that in mind, Lee, and we'll have to look into that as well.
There aren't any more questions in the chat. So if people have more questions, Ken has a question about CE hours, so I'll let Ariana address that in the chat or over the mic. But yeah, if you have more questions, throw them in the chat. Also, we really encourage you just, unmuting yourself and asking any questions that you might have about any of the presentations that we started today.
I'll just say real quickly on the CE hours, there isn't CE hours for DPR for this. The CE hours are for the LA Irrigated Lands Program. So there's no CE hours for DPR. We didn't submit everything on time. So we don't have those CEs for DPR, unfortunately. Next time we'll be on top of things, get everything submitted on time. You have to submit everything to DPR over a month in advance. So we just didn't have everything together yet, but we're much more organized going forward. So next time there will be DPR credits.
I have a question. Is there any treatment now for the fig black fly?
I have some of this, Haramrit. Chris, do you want to talk about it all first?
Go for it. You probably have more up-to-date info than I do.
Okay, so are you a fig grower or is it in your backyard?
Fig grower and backyard.
Okay. So for fig growers, I know there's some trials, but in terms of stuff that's actually labeled for use, I don't think there is that much. In both situations, putting out McPhail traps baited with Torula yeast is still a pretty highly recommended thing for monitoring for them and also doing some mass trapping. If it is in a backyard setting, you can do things like trying to tarp under your trees, doing sanitation, getting rid of all the figs that fall to the ground so then they aren't moving into the soil and pupating. On a larger scale, that's not really feasible, but if you can do that at all, that'll help mitigate the populations. Doing baits like GF 120 Naturalite can be somewhat effective, and that's also generally recommended, but as to how well exactly that works, it's still a little bit uncertain, and it's not as effective as it is for other fruit flies. So doing stuff like physical control, sanitation is pretty important on a backyard scale. Otherwise, yeah, mass trapping and doing some of the baits as well, like GF120 Natural Light is kind of the best option. But again, there is active research going into that. Hopefully there's more tools soon, but not stuff that's currently labeled for the most part.
Thank you.
Let's see. In the chat, there's a good practice to cut flowers off a treated aloe plant to not harm beneficial insects. Potentially. Again, if that's something you're comfortable with, cutting it off and you are going to be, say, spraying it with spinosad and you're getting all parts of the plant, that is not a bad idea if you're worried about harming bees because bees will come to that. They can't feed on it. Spinosad does have some residual activity, so it could be present. It's definitely not a bad idea if that's something you're comfortable doing. So if that's the good concern you have, then yeah, I think it could certainly make sense.
Rebecca's curious if there's any information on control of root mealy. I'm assuming mealybug.
Neonics are what I would recommend. I don't know what Eric probably, but neonics I've seen good success for control.
That would be my general thought. Mealybugs are hard because they're even more hidden. So systemics is probably the way to go, and then trying to also do some decent sanitation if you can, like trying to prevent them from becoming an issue in the first place. But they're tough. Mealybugs are tough, and root mealybugs are particularly tough. So.
Amy asks, are there any natural predators of the thrips?
So for Thrips parvispinus, there are some. They're susceptible to kind of general predators that feed on thrips, like Orius, minute pirate bugs. Lacewings eat everything, so they will also eat those thrips. For predatory mites, they seem to be a bit more effective against things like Western flower thrips and not quite as effective against Thrips parvispinus. This has been something where, again, there's ongoing research both in Ontario and Florida looking into this and trying to figure out more compatible biocontrol programs. So there's some, it seems to be not quite as effective as for things like Western flower thrips. That being said, there's also some entomopathogenic nematodes that will work against Thrips parvispinus as well, getting up to like 60-ish% mortality. So combining these things, you could probably come up with a decent control plan. As of right now, we're still kind of trying to be under a more eradication plan for it because we don't want it to be present. But there are some natural predators for Thrips parvispinus. For allothrips, don't know, probably similar. Don't know though. Looks like Fred's asking if dropped figs should be disposed of in green waste. So realistically, black fig flies everywhere. So, it spreads around. But I mean, you could get rid of them in more like municipal waste and like not really worry about that, but I think it would probably be okay to do either one. In terms of, if you have green waste sitting around on your own property or stuff for a while or trying to compost it on site, I'd be a bit more careful of that because then they probably can emerge, go into the soil, and then fly off again. But yeah.
Sharpshooters are doing great this year. Numbers are very high already. I'm working on a project with UCR testing some new products for nurseries right now, and I can't even remember the product name right now, but it actually increased sharpshooter numbers last year in our testing. So that product is not looking very good. So sharpshooters are they're still around. Last couple years, it seems like numbers have been increasing, but we've also been finding a lot more parasitoids out in the field. So parasitoids are spreading around pretty good, and so we're seeing a lot more parasitism rates are up as well. So that's a good thing, and that's spreading. And CDFA has programs where they're releasing natural enemies for sharpshooters. So hopefully that continues, and those parasitoids, you know, they're have pretty good parasitism numbers now, but that's been going up. So hopefully that brings sharpshooters. Jawhole borers are spreading everywhere right now. So yeah, it's there's the greater Shawhole borer in Santa Cruz area, then Shawhole borer in San Jose. It's spreading pretty good right now in Santa Barbara area in the riverbeds and everything there. So Shawhole borer is definitely spreading throughout California.
Eric, by any chance, do you have a Zoom link for your CAPCA meeting? Is there a Zoom link?
No, it's in person.
Gotcha.
I did have a question for you, Haramrit, about lantana mites. Have you done any trials, or is there any existing research on how best to manage it? I know you said that Botanigard dips could work for them, but yeah, is there anything else related to that?
No, there are not many, I guess, not a lot of research has been done, but there is a natural, biological control, predatory mite for that. I was considering writing a grant for that, but Denise hasn't gotten back to me. I don't know if she got back to you. Has she sent any photos? So I know she was interested in writing a grant. Probably I'll go check with her in person and then probably will reach back to you on it.
Yeah, if anyone on the call has issues with lantana mites, lantana gall mites, also let us know because I'm interested to see how widespread of an issue this is or if it's relatively localized to a couple different nurseries.
Yeah, I was only able to find only one paper, but not a lot of research has been done. So I think it could be a good topic for research.
Ian just has a comment saying we do get it lantana gall mite, but only on new gold lantana. And then Ken just asks Wong Long Bing question mark. Any comments from our panelists?
Eric, you want to take this one? Like whoever.
I mean, yeah, still here, still spreading, not super fast, but it is. So, yeah, there's been expansions of the quarantine relatively recently, but I'd say there's nothing particularly new that I've seen. It's still just kind of slow burn and still definitely present. So, business as usual. Keep an eye out for it.
Resistant rootstocks are in development, so they're hopefully those will be commercially available. I mean, it's still going to be probably 10 years before they're commercially available, but we do have pretty good resistant rootstocks now that they've developed. They're just not commercially available, so still going through all the testing on those.
Doesn't look like there's many more questions, but just one last reminder, if anyone finds signs of allothrips, especially outside of those three counties, San Diego, Ventura, Santa Barbara, grab some pics, let me know.
Yeah, there is some, a couple counties between San Diego and Ventura, so it's likely in those areas. So we would be happy to get any reports of that present anywhere else. All right, well, unless any more questions come through, thank you everyone for coming today. Happy to see such a good turnout and some active engagement from everyone. So thank you so much. And like I said, this presentation or this event will be posted on our YouTube account. And we'll have that on our website and everything, so it's easy to find. So thank you again.